We are honored to have you on the PLA podcast, Heather. We go back some number of years, and I was trying to remember how many, and I'm not even sure how many, but I know we were connected originally through People Tech Partners. And you immediately stood out to me because we both went to UC San Diego for undergrad. And I was like, go Tritons.
Go Triton, yes.
Yes. And the last few years you spent at Signal Fire as a partner there, as their head of talent. And, just to dive right in, because you've had an extraordinary career that we will get into, but this last few years has been fascinating because Signal Fire is a pretty unique venture capital firm in the way that they look at talent. And you were there as head of talent. I'd love to know more about the firm, what your role was there, and how it's evolved over time.
Yeah. So the firm was founded now a little over a decade ago, but originally, before they even raised their first fund, they were founded on the premise that good data can inform better outcomes for companies. And that talent data in particular is going to be incredibly important for companies. Founders struggle with that. And so they created something called Beacon Talent. Beacon is a platform. It's an AI engine that was created, again, over a decade ago. So it's been training on this model for so long. It's one of the only AI native funds, I think, if not the only. And its whole differentiator is this notion that if you add data plus tech plus people, you're going to have better outcomes. And so there was a mix of, and there is still a mix of great products, great data, and also really great operators who are there to help portfolio companies through. And that's the role I was honored to play for 4 years, which was leading our talent team, which helped our portfolio with everything from hiring to performance to compensation to whatever else you could imagine. So, yeah.
Amazing. And how many companies were you supporting in that role?
Oh gosh, well, there's nearly 200 companies in the portfolio overall. But at any given time, probably, a dozen frequent flyers and a few lightweight stuff, but it would shift over time. So depending on where the company was sporadically, you'd spend a lot of time with the company and then they'd be off into the races with, an experienced people leader, and it's time to sort of say goodbye on that part. But other people at the firm would pick up in different categories. Where I really spent my most time was with the earliest stage companies. So think seed, Series A, Series B companies before they've hired a people executive, helping make sure that they have the right people and talent foundation so that when that executive comes in, less organizational debt, which is, I think, what we've all experienced coming in as people leaders, is you can kind of inherit a lot of that. So,
yeah. Heather, I'm really excited to hear your insider view about how the VC talent partner role works with HR leaders inside those portfolio companies. So our listeners will generally be mid and senior level HR people at tech companies. It may be in part funded by Signal Fire. What would an in-house HR leader benefit from knowing about how the talent partner role works?
Yeah. And maybe if it's helpful, I can share how I even started it in the first place, which was that I was an operator. I was the founding people executive at 2 companies that were venture backed right before joining Signal Fire. And in both places, I was pleased to have met a talent partner. And it was a job I didn't know existed. A lot of times, if you are going from being like a HR generalist or a recruiter and you're a first timer in the executive seat, you've never met this person before, because usually, there's a board, there's a VC that's invested from that firm, but you don't realize all of the support roles that exist, what they call like a platform team inside a venture. But there's typically, if the fund is large enough, a talent partner or a team of talent partners. I think Andreessen Horowitz has 60 of them. So depending on the size of the firm, you're going to see a different number of folks on those teams. And their full-time job is to help make you as successful as possible. And so I think, it's a really unique and interesting job that I saw on the other side. And because I utilized them so much, I was like, I kind of want to do this job too.
How about some do's and don'ts for portfolio company HR leaders in working with a talent partner?
Honestly, it's more do's than don'ts. I think the biggest thing will happen is it's intimidating to work with a VC. I think, these are people that are giving your company lots of money and you want to show a good face. And a lot of times you think you might be nervous around that. I would not be. So the only don't, what I would say is don't be shy, utilize what they offer. Every VC spikes in different sets of value added services on top of the money itself. Very few VCs are just a check. Most VCs, from the board member, the investor, to various operators, spike in some areas. Some are more go-to-market centric, some are people and talent centric. So if yours is one that has full-time talent partner or talent partners, go to them and figure out, where do you spike? What is your background? How can you help me? Because they want to. That is the full-time job. And so when I think about it, some VC talent partners come from an executive search world where they're going to have really deep networks. They're going to understand executive hiring. If you're coming from a role where you've never led the people function before and now you're having to build build out a leadership bench, they can be your best friend in helping you structure a process, think through the right search partners, that sort of thing. But if they come from an operating background like mine, they could be a thought partner. I spent probably 30% of my portfolio facing time advising and mentoring first timers in the head of people function, whether it was a recruiter who's suddenly owning the whole thing at a Series A company, or a director of people who they parted ways with the VP and never backfilled. And now this person is running the function from the director's seat. So they want to help you. They're not out to get you. They're not like checking in on you, trying to figure out like what can they pass along on this company to the VC. They're just there to help, add value, have an impact on you, and really create like a favorable relationship between the companies. And so use them and know what they're good for based on their background. Like be a recruiter and read their background and figure out where are they going to spike. One other thing I would just quickly say is, if they don't reach out to you, don't take that as a sign they don't want to talk to you, because like I mentioned, there's hundreds of portfolio companies in most VCs. And so it's not that they're not reaching out to you because you're not important or they don't want to help you. It's that their inbox is probably really oversubscribed with a bunch of people asking them for things. And they're probably reactively trying to like tread water and just support the people who are coming to them. And that doesn't mean they don't want to help you, but go to them and bring your specific asks of what you would like to see and work with them on. If they offer programs or events, like go to those too, and then build a relationship over time, because then it's going to be a lot easier to be top of mind for them when they do have proactive time.
That's really helpful. And understanding where they're coming from and what they can help with most, that's a particularly good tip. I'd love to just dig a little bit on sensitivities. Like sometimes there could be some angst about sharing some of the dirty laundry of the organization or skeletons in the closet, or your CEO founder might be less comfortable with you having a conversation with investors. Like how do you sort through those situations where things aren't perfect and or your leadership team is being, kind of protective?
Yeah, it's a lot like being an internal people leader in that sense, and that you have to use discretion because every situation is nuanced. There are times where people leaders have shared with me frustrations with the CEO or founder or something that's going on. And you kind of sit on that information as a talent partner until you think that it's like needed to be shared outward. And you just try to coach them just like you would as an HR business partner. You try to get them to go back and like solve the problem themselves versus get in the way. But there are times where maybe there needs to be a change out of leadership. And now you have some insight, not to say, hey, this is what they told me, but like you should go talk to the whole leadership team because I think they've got thoughts, and so kind of helping redirect the right conversations to be happening. It's honestly very parallel. You're almost kind of like a business partner to the founders, but from a different perspective, if that makes sense. And so it's just using discretion, knowing when do you share, when do you up-level concerns, and how can you get them to help themselves first? It's kind of a mix of coaching and advising, really.
So the talent partners aren't a priest. They're not a doctor. They're more like an advisor. They're more like a business partner for you.
Yeah. Think of it like internal consultant. Like imagine if you had like a little internal consultant who was there full time just to try to support you with various things. And some of them also are more programmatic. Like some of them are planning events and thinking about meetups and mixers and small groups. I remember when I was at Rainforest QA, I was a part of the Bessemer portfolio, and Mia at Bessemer at the time, she would host these roundtables for just any top level talent people leader that was at a company. And she'd have like wine and snacks. And she'd be like, come to the Bessemer office, hang out. We're going to talk about topics. And you would just send all the things that were top of mind. And I was a first timer in a VPC at that point, and I was nervous. And there were people there from PagerDuty and Procore who had been around the block 10 times, and I could learn from them. But also there were people who had never worked with remote teams, and I had experience there. So I could give something back too, even though I was the most junior person in the room. I think it's like just attending those. Even when I went remote and I moved up to Pacific Northwest, I still would fly down for those roundtables because they were so beneficial as a community builder to kind of get to know people who are doing the work and see through those things. So again, just understand what your VC offers you. It's going to be something, and then figure out how can you make the best out of what that offering is and really utilize it to its fullest potential, because it's free. And in fact, your interests are totally aligned. They're giving you money because they want you to succeed too. They see an outcome when you see an outcome. So it's a lot simpler than it might feel when you think about VC being this like elitist thing. It's really not. These are just people who want to help.
Maybe there's one more angle, and from personal experience, and you probably have a bunch of these that you could share. I got my first chief HR officer role in part due to a recommendation from a talent partner that I'd worked with before. And so like they were able to speak to working with me at my prior company. For the past 5 years, I've been working 50% of my time with a private equity company as a talent partner. And again, I had talent partners serve as references for me who said, I do this work. I've seen Andrew as an operator. I think he could do this work. And so I wonder if, Heather, you've ever been able to be a reference for portfolio company talent, and if that's something that's common or if it was kind of out of the ordinary.
Yeah, I have. I've been asked, and often through like a back channel of sorts too, which is like, oh, you work with this portfolio company. How are they doing inside of it? I only ever really speak to it if I've worked with them directly on some things and then speak to what I know. Obviously, context is dependent. So I'm never going to be the strongest reference for someone. But if I haven't worked with them, like that's not just in the VC, that's anywhere. Like I want to know what I'm speaking to when I give a reference. I take them very seriously. But can speak to saying like, hey, they were here from this period of growth to this period. They were a right hand of this person. They reported here, like really helping that person succeed. And I will say the number one request I got probably on either LinkedIn or emails just in general from people was, how do I get your job? So I think the fact that we've both done the PEVC thing, it's kind of like a rarefied opportunity because you get to kind of be a consultant and flex in and out of companies, but there's no business development. So it's a pretty fun and cool job. And I think lots of people want to do that job. And I think more operators should do that job. A lot of the background of people who have done it historically have been search partners. And I think that's two reasons, by the way, if anyone's interested in taking the VC talent job. The first reason I've learned, and I thought it was always this, is that a lot of times companies care about the leadership team you're able to build out, and that's where they want to add help. And because search partners have done a lot of search work, in general, they have a huge network and they know what great looks like in an executive. So they can assess and evaluate and help them build their teams. That was sort of the ethos that I thought. But I got a new version of it, I think, once I joined, which I think is where operators do struggle sometimes, which is client management. Ultimately, you're not part of these teams. You're not in one company. Again, I mentioned I'm in and out of a dozen at any point in time, maybe more sometimes. You have to carry and hold so many different people's contexts and teams and jump from situation to situation and still make it feel like you remember who they are and what their thing was so you can offer the best help and make them feel really seen and valued. And that's a hard thing to do. And I see Jess and Andrew with like you both do like coaching and advising and like all these things, like it's client management piece. So if you've been in-house as a people leader with just one company, while you can be more helpful maybe as an operator advising these companies on how to build out their processes, you're going to have to figure out how do I balance the load of many different companies at one time. And that's where that search partner kind of comes from. So I think that's a helpful distinguishment, but I really felt like that was sort of the key thing that was missing for me of why aren't there more operators in this role? Like why not more people leaders in this role? So
yeah, I've even heard a subtle nuance, a distinction between a talent partner, which is more exec search oriented, and a talent operating partner. That was an additional word, but indicated a little bit more about the type of work. Yeah. Well, I think you said it really clearly. A lot of people want to do this work. You've been doing it at a high level for a well-known firm for a number of years. And at the time of this discussion, you just announced that you're leaving Signal Fire. Would you be willing to spill some tea with us and share a little bit more about like why the move and what your plans are to do next?
Yeah. I've always been inspired by careers like the two of yours and many other people that we know who have gone out on their own and done incredible things as consultants. And so I have decided to do the same. In fact, I thought I was going to do it when I first joined Signal Fire, but then I met them and I was like, I'll do this. So it's always been in the back of my mind for a long time. So I'm starting something called Waypoint Works. It is a consultancy that involves embedded advisory, so working with early stage companies to help them build out great people and talent foundations, leadership coaching, as well as doing offsites and workshops and facilitation around various areas that I'm passionate about, especially management, people management, hiring, and so on. So I'm really excited for it. It's taking a bet on myself. By the time this comes out, I think my website should be up and all of that. So I'm excited to engage with many of you through that new venture.
Let's make sure to call it out for the audience. What's the website?
It's waypointworks.co, so .co.
Well, we're really excited for you, Heather. And, you know, Andrew and I have gone out on our own and we know all the feelings that come with it as you're embarking on this journey, but you have an incredible network, of people who know how amazing you are. And so I know this is the beginning of something great for you.
Thank you. And I just have to say, like, you two are part of the reason that I wanted to do this. I think my community of amazing leaders has a lot of people who have gone out on their own, especially in the post-pandemic world. A lot of people have done it. And watching the careers that you've built for yourselves and the ways that I've seen passion light up and like get to work on the things that bring you joy and the flexibility that it brings, like there's been so much of it that I've admired from the sidelines for so long. So I'm excited to jump on the field. It's a little scary, but mostly because I'm terrible at business development and selling myself and talking about myself. So that's why I just do this, but I'm excited for the work. It's like the work that gets me really lit up and excited, and seeing you both have both of those things going is great. So yeah, very excited.
Thank you. Well, I think we all struggle with the self-promotion piece of it. So
Yeah, definitely me.
you will find a way. I know you'll find a way.
Thank
I
you.
love that you call your business Waypoint Works because there
Yeah.
are so many waypoints in each of our journeys. And I would love to touch on maybe a few of those waypoints for yourself. And I know Webflow is one of those hallmarks of your career. And so maybe we double down there. But what were some of the peaks or highlights and maybe low points of your career as you've journeyed through?
Yeah, Webflow was probably, I mean, there were so many. Webflow was one of them for sure. I think if I were to go into that role in particular, that was the role I had just before Signal Fire. So we're just backing up 4 years ago is when I left. So let's go back even further, like 7 years ago. So it was 2019 and Webflow was a seed stage company. And I was looking to be really intentional in this search. I had now been a VP of people. I felt more capable of going on and doing that again. And I wanted to be really thoughtful about where I did it. And so I started thinking about what could be next for me. And I looked at a few different companies, but Webflow stood out because at the time, and this is unheard of, I think, they were seed stage. They had 0 executives. They had 90 employees and they were cash flow positive, not profitable. So you don't hear of a lot of seed stage companies that make it to 90, especially because they're cash flow positive and it wasn't some mega round. It was like a $2.7 million round or something at their seed. And these founders had done it with a team of primarily ICs and homegrown management. It was beautiful to see. They were incredibly inspirational. They still are. And the product was really cool too. Like I got the chills thinking about it because it was democratizing access to development for everyone. And this is before AI. And so, obviously now there are multiple ways. And I think Webflow now has AI capabilities as well. But it was this wild thing where I would get the chills just thinking about what they were doing and the economic prosperity they were creating for people who couldn't build an app or a website in the past. And so the whole thing was really special and I knew it was right for me. And I joined as the very first executive. So again, they had no executives. It was 3 co-founders and me, and then the broader team. There was no people team. It was 2 people with the title. The title was literally operations for both of them. And they are brilliant and smart people. And actually was a sister of the CEO and founder and kind of joined to help with the office management movement, right? So it was this really special place. But there was pretty little infrastructure. Vlad, the CEO, was still pushing the buttons for payroll, and there was no applicant tracking system or HRIS. Everything was basically Slack messages. And so it was like this company that had done so well because of great leaders and product market fit, not infrastructure. And so I got to come in and really think about how do we build the infrastructure for scale. And I'm glad that we did because flash forward a year later, we had started building out the leadership team, all of this. 1 year later, March 2020, we are sitting in pandemic. And a lot of companies contracted in that time, but some companies really grew and had a growth spurt in that time because of their online presence. And Webflow was one of those. Businesses wanted to create more web presence, better web presence, come online. And so when a lot of companies were kind of like, oh no, we have to lay off teams, we have to rethink our strategy, Webflow was in the opposite. So suddenly, thank goodness we had foundations because it was hyper-growth mode. Our team, increased tremendously across the board, as did our capabilities as a business, revenue, everything grew. Everything was up into the right. It was this beautiful story.
What I love about what you're pointing out is you looked for a business that was actually very strong fundamentally, that you were joining, had some unique components of it where you felt like you could come in, but you recognized the strengths of the business first and foremost and of the leadership that you were walking into.
Yeah.
When you have a situation like that where there's so much infrastructure that's missing, how did you figure out what to work on, how to prioritize that? Because it could be anything and everything because it was pretty much non-existent for the most part. How did you go about figuring out what was your strategy in that situation?
It's a really good question. Well, first of all, I think it's a good call out to think about the strength of the business that you're joining. I think a lot of people don't do this. A lot of people want the job. The job sounds cool. It has the title, it has the comp. You're like, let's do it. I don't think that's right. I took a pay cut to go to Webflow. I left a company where I was making 5 figures more, but I knew that company, I was sitting on a pile of equity that I didn't think was ever going to amount to something. I didn't think they were ever going to exit. And I didn't really believe in the product in the same way. I mean, it was a fine product. I didn't have the feels. And I believe that if you can find a product where product market fit is so wild that the growth can keep up, you might see some chaos infrastructure-wise, but you're choosing to hop on a rocket ship. And I think, understanding that you can see the business fundamentals are there, the leadership is there. You see the journey and you see that the journey can be something meaningful. It's huge. Like think like an investor as a people leader when you're taking a job and decide, do you think there's going to be an outcome here? And is it an outcome that I want to be a part of? Because ultimately that is a big reason why I chose Webful, and I'm glad I did. And then in terms of what to work on first, so funny. So you're interviewing and I'm like, well, what do you think the biggest problems are to the, the founders? And they said, we're not great at sourcing. Like we need to really work on sourcing. And I said, well, what is your applicant tracking system? Like what tooling do you have? And they said, we have Greenhouse. And I said, great, that's a great start. Like we'll work from there. I joined, they had bought Greenhouse, but they hadn't set it up yet because nobody knew exactly what to do with it. They had started, but like, we don't really know how to set it up. It's like a blank slate. So I thought I was going to come in and do sourcing strategy and employer brand and like talent attraction pieces. And then I was like, we got some more basic things. So I think you have to really look at the sequence of the build. I think that is huge in any job. No matter where you join, there's going to be things where you're like, oh, like, how do they not have that yet? And then you're going to stop judging the minute you try and do it yourself because it's so hard to get anything done, right? There's so many pieces to it. There's so many people, there's competing priorities. So I think it's like getting really clear on what is the roadmap? Like think like a product leader. That's kind of how I think about the role is if I'm a product leader, I'm building a product and that product is employee experience. What is the baseline? Like maybe it's not all the bells and whistles and the fun stuff that people say they want, but what's the mix of like core infrastructure that we need to scale this thing so we can work smarter, not harder later? And let me find a couple of quick wins on the side so that there's some wow moments, even if it's not the thing. So what I did was I paired the infrastructure build, but I layered on comp, we are a P2P company actually, but essentially it was like perks and benefits. And so we were a remote first company with in-office perks for the in-office people, but nothing to pair to the others. And so I thought we can do talent attraction, employer brand by calling in more remote folks, getting this quick win, like signing up quickly for comp, offer a fitness stipend. People wanted wellness stuff. They were asking for that right when I joined. That felt like a burning need from some folks on the team. And it was an easy, small, quick win I could just do on the side while building the machine. So I think it's a mix of understanding like what are your core boulders or big rocks that you're trying to accomplish. And if they don't have any jazz to them or appeal and you're trying to win over this early team, like take a listening tour first, like get to know what people want. And when you see small wins you can do in a 4-hour afternoon and get the buy-in easy, just do those while you're at it. So you kind of have this like balanced approach. That's at least how I approach things.
Yeah, I love that you were talking about both like what's the big rock, where's the boulders, but also what are the quick wins that employees will recognize and appreciate and say like, okay, there's something happening while you're trying to have that runway to be able to get the bigger things in place. I had the pleasure of being on a panel with Vlad, your CEO.
Oh, I love it.
Some years ago for Y Combinator's growth program.
Yeah.
And he was just so thoughtful and seemed like a pretty amazing CEO to be able to partner with. But I'd love to hear a bit more about, your relationship with him as a CEO and maybe any advice that you have for people leaders who are trying to figure out, one, how do I find somebody who I kind of jive with? What do I look for? And then maybe an example of like, what was one of the trickiest things that the two of you worked through together where maybe you didn't initially see eye to eye? And, what did you do about that? Like, did you eventually see eye to eye or figure out another way through that?
Oh, yeah, that's a hard, good question. Okay. So there are like Baskin Robbins, 31 flavors of CEOs out there. Like you could get any kind. And Vlad is a rare breed because he is so kind and thoughtful and people-centric. It is no mistake that he hired a people executive before any other executive on the team. That is unheard of. Most companies, if you join as a people exec, you might be the first one of that flavor, but you're not going to be the first executive. There's going to be someone else there, usually marketing, sales, product engineering. Someone else is there. It's not you. And so the fact that he went there first tells you a lot about who he is and what he wanted to do. And also he's super self-aware. And if there was one critique, is like conflict avoidant, like just cared about people too much. And so the piece there is that's where things could be hard. So I'd say like if there was one challenge that we would work through, it was I'm a people pleaser. So is he. Trying to say yes to too many people works just fine when you're like 90 people, but it starts to break down when you're like 400 people and you can't actually say yes to too many things because they conflict with each other and you can't do both at one time. And so I don't have a specific example, but I would say it was getting to this place of how do we like pull each other in early before saying yes to something that maybe isn't going to work because we said yes to this other thing. And those two things can't happen in the same moment. And so how do we work through those? So I don't have like, again, a specific example, but I would say with your CEO, having that chemistry, like first you have to respect them and trust them and know that if they say something that you don't agree with, that it's coming from a place of like deep care and good intent. If you don't have that with your CEO, like it's probably the wrong chemistry match. I think a chemistry match between a people leader and a CEO is really important. And then if you don't feel that naturally, like get curious and figure out like, How can I get inside their head and understand why they're thinking the way they are, like what makes them tick? Because ultimately for Vlad, it was very much like an HBDI, like a red, yellow kind of person. And so am I. It's who's impacted by this? How can we support them? What's going on? And also big picture thinking, like what's right for the future of the business. But sometimes the logistics got left out for both of us. And so when we have the same strengths and some of the same gaps, like that would probably be more of the challenges, less that we were conflicting because we felt differently about things.
That's so hard to assess for on the way in, though. I
Yeah.
wonder, boy, I'd love to just get one more layer of peeling back to see, like, how did you figure out that this was a match before you, like you said, you didn't just take the job, you took a pay cut. So you must have felt something strongly right away. And you've had a number of jobs. This wasn't like your one flash in the pan. This was like a series of wins. How did you assess that this was a good fit?
So there were a lot of signs. I believe that if you observe and you sit and you're quiet and you watch things, you see who people really are. People tell you who they are every single day. And it's sometimes when we want something so badly, we fail to see it. I think the same goes for reference checks. When you want to hire someone, you fail to see the signs of what people might be telling you in the reference check that it's not going to be a match. And you're essentially doing a reference check the entire time you're interviewing as you talk to this person. I think the first good sign was that the reference came from Jack Altman. So a friend of mine, he was like I was working with him on a lot of stuff. And he was like, this guy is great. You should talk to him. So one, trusted referral is how I met him in the first place. It was not a search firm. It was not a cold application. It was through a referral. And then I think two, every step of the way, he was deferential in his communication with me. He didn't cut me off. Like he made me feel valued. He seemed to understand the nature of the people function. But what really came down to it in the end, besides the fact that I just believed in the business and how he was running it and how much I was just inspired by him and who he was he showed himself to me. And I've never shared this in any public way. So this is kind of scary. I didn't plan on saying this. So I was back channeled by my then current CEO. So basically what had happened was reference checks kind of come, and my former CEO said, I think she's really smart. She'll get a lot of stuff done, but I don't know if she's strategic enough. She's more of a director than a VP. You should down level it. And so that's pretty hurtful, and I was earlier in my career. I was a job changer. I hadn't had a bunch of runs. I wasn't like a 10-year veteran of HR. I hadn't even been in startups for 6 years at that point. Like I had changed careers from higher education. And so I was feeling down on myself when he said that to him. And Vlad said to me, I want to let you know that he said that, but I want to let you know that I still want to hire you. And I still want to hire you as a VP because I saw in you these things. And I think you're strategic and it's an input, but I just want you to know what was said. And I got the chills. Like I still get them now thinking about it because that was candor. Like that was honesty. He didn't have to share it. He could have just hired me as a VP, not said it. He could have changed the role and not told me why. He could have made me feel, whatever he wanted to in that moment and used it to kind of use leverage in getting me to take the job for whatever he wanted. He didn't. He said, I'm going to do my own thing. And I got that call and I cried. I cried because I was disappointed in the past, but I was also crying because I was so honored that somebody would be so good. And I had 3 job offers that I was sitting on, and it was a really easy choice at that point. One of them was my former boss, who I loved, was my other job offer. And I would have worked with him in a heartbeat if I didn't get that job. But seeing him in that moment was like, this is somebody with integrity. This is somebody who's going to be honest with me, but from a place of care. This is radical candor practice. I want this. And so long story short, I took the job, obviously, in that moment.
What a foundational way to build trust with somebody too. Of like, here's information that I have and here's what I'm doing with it. And rather than, I think what you're highlighting is rather than putting it away somewhere and doing whatever he was going to do, he was just like, hey, Heather, here it is. I'm going to put it in between us and I'm telling you how to interpret it. And the other thing I love about what you described in your relationship with Vlad is how you had this mutual respect, that it was coming from a place always, and as much as you can with somebody else, of even if I disagree with what they might be saying initially, I am going to look beyond that and get curious about why they're coming to that conclusion, because they must have a good reason for it, even if I'm not seeing it right now.
Yeah. And 9 times out of 10, maybe 99 times out of 100, it was always a really kind thing. It just wasn't always necessarily like the practical choice. Like it was the kind choice every time. And so that's like an easier challenge. I know not every CEO is this way. I will say I've worked with, 100 plus CEOs at this point. And even the ones who might be rough around the edges or tough and aren't as kind as Vlad is, I think even those ones come from a really good place. They want well. If they have a chip on their shoulder because they're trying to succeed and they can't let this thing not work out, they will do some things that might seem kind of wild. But when you kind of really get below the surface and understand that CEO, you realize that they mean well. Everyone means well. Nobody is coming, at this job from a place of I'm trying to harm or hurt people. They're coming at it from a place of whatever their own history and trauma and lenses that they're working through alongside all of this. And then how they show up might be something that reflects something a little different. And so like that trust, that relationship is super important, but also kind of stepping back and going like, what's really going on here? And how can I understand this person so deeply that when I disagree with them, I'm disagreeing from the same side of the table, not from a different side of the table. You're not above them or over them, you're next to them.
Heather, that's so powerful in terms of trying to understand where your CEO founder is coming from. I feel as though sometimes the CEO founders get a bad rap from HR leaders. Like I hear an awful lot of empathizing of, oh, you've got a founder and they just don't get it. They're just not a people-centric leader and I should just pick up stakes and go find another job.
Yeah, good luck. It's a tough environment out there.
Well, that's true. At the same time, though, I wonder if there isn't an opportunity for a little bit more empathy as well. And I think you put it like really nicely. No CEO founder is out there trying to be difficult, I think. Nobody's out there trying to get people to quit or the company not to meet its goals. I guess a personal observation would be more often I see people getting in their own way because they care so much that leads to some not always productive behaviors that are often magnified by a power dynamic.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a really great observation. And I think what you said around they're not people-centric as a CEO. Well, guess what? Like you're making it this or that. Like it's either people or it's business. The business is the people too. Like it's all of it, right? And so you have to think like a business leader and people is a part of the business, but it is not at odds with the business. And so how do you think through being a business leader first that happens to focus on people and being a business leader who is understanding how do you achieve the business's goals through the people? And again, not putting the things at odds when it's like a false dichotomy. These things can exist together and they can commingle. And like maybe you just need to step back and think a little bit further about what does that actually look like and how do we get it done? Because again, there are some wild ideas that have been presented over the years by all kinds of CEOs to me. And at first I want to be like, why would you ever do that? And then if I try to be like, okay, let me pretend I'm them for a second. Like, why would they do that? I'm like, I get it. Like, it's not hard to get. It's just that you're holding your own values and your own sense of right and wrong as like objective. It is not as subjective. And so like, how do you take a more objective lens at the situation or a multi-perspective lens that at least you can kind of like find them where they are and bring them your way more effectively than if you're just trying to pull into your side when they're not on your side.
Yeah. If you can walk in their shoes, if you can see their perspective, you'll be a better influencer of them.
Yeah. And I think to amplify that is maybe to put it in slightly different set of words is capturing it of figuring out what are they optimizing for?
Yeah.
To your point, right? Like there is this false dichotomy between is it people or is it business? And it's like, no, at the end of the day, like let's get down to, are we optimizing for, is it revenue right now? Are we optimizing for productivity or what is it? And I think this got highlighted in the last few years. I remember at the beginning of COVID and the pandemic and all these offices shutting down. And there was a lot of thrash that was happening of, do we bring people back to the office or not at this point in time? And it was like, are we optimizing for the health of our employees? Or are we optimizing for the productivity? And the minute that you could put it into terms of what is first and foremost of like, of course we care about both. But, how do we think about it? And then how do we mitigate? So if we are optimizing for productivity, which was being assumed in some organizations of being in person, how do we then mitigate the risk on the health front to be able to do that? But I think what you're highlighting here is so powerful of the minute you can say, here are the things that we are optimizing for, the values that we are upholding, then we can start to then work through this as a problem together where we're on the same side of the table as opposed to it's this or that, please choose. And, oh, you didn't choose the thing that I wanted. And now we're like, I need to treat you like an enemy. And then what does that do for the relationship?
Totally. And this is like true for any relationship, like CEO and VP of people or any two people in a room. Like, honestly, most of my struggles in the workplace where I felt like I was on a different side of the table was not me versus CEO. It was me versus some other leader who wanted to prioritize some people initiative that like we weren't going to prioritize right then and there, like raising comp again. Like, I'm sorry, we're not having this conversation again, And so I think it's like, easy to point fingers at the person with the most power, but you can use the same strategy for any kind of even personal relationships too. So I love this. Yeah, this is fun.
I'm wondering, and maybe for the benefit of our listeners, well, and for me and Jess, like how did you go about developing this perspective, having the empathy to understand where other people are coming from and being able to influence it as effectively as you do? Was it life experience, work experience, education? Like, how does somebody else grow this?
I think it's how I'm wired, for starters, for better or worse. Okay, so if you're probably all familiar with like the 4 quadrants of emotional intelligence, where there's like self and other awareness, self and other management, I've always been stronger on the other side than the self side. So other management, other awareness. Sometimes I don't know how I feel about something, but I'm very aware of how everybody else in the room feels about the thing. There's a lot of people with really great boundaries that like always know how they're feeling in a moment. I'm like, I envy those people because sometimes I'm like, wait, how do I feel about this thing? And so I think that's one. And then I think 2 is like being very aware of theoretical dynamics in organizations. And I have my doctorate in organizational leadership, so it kind of does help sometimes in the workplace, but it was more theoretical, which is like thinking about bases of power in a room, thinking about like leadership styles. There's so many different types of theories that exist that can help you assess and analyze what's really going on beyond the thing right in front of your face to figure out like what could be moving this. Like Jess mentioned, like, what are you optimizing for? But also, like, what's the driver of the thing that's happening under the current? And I tend to look at everything in bases of power. It's, again, just kind of like what I'm naturally gravitated towards, because power speaks to so many other theories, like societal norms or whatever else. And so for me, I think I'm just always looking at where is the power in the room, and also what power do I have, because there's more than one type of power. It's not just title. There's 5 to 7, depending on which version of French and Raven you look at. But like, where's your power and where's others' power? And then how does power being leveraged to get things done? And not in a way where it's manipulative or influencing for an agenda, but just from how decisions get made. So the more you can be aware of that, I think the more you can start to unlock these pieces. And then I would say, not from my education, but just the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And then the book, Think Again by Adam Grant. Both of those books help me think from changing the question itself. So why am I influencing this person with this thing? Like, how do I make it their want? How do I make them want that thing before I want the thing? And then, so how do you frame the ask? And then on Adam Grant, it's like, are you even pushing for the right thing to begin with? Like, can you get curious and ask more questions? Because maybe the thing you want isn't actually the thing you want, and you're just stuck in your own ways. So it's like, what are the frameworks and tools at your disposal to pull yourself out of it? That was like 18 frameworks in one answer, though. So sorry.
That's a lot of frameworks. And we need to make sure that we pick that up in the show notes for sure.
Yeah, we'll list them out for you at the end.
Well, and you very subtly like dropped in, oh, I've got a doctorate in organizational behavior as well. So like, should more HR people go get advanced educations in organization and leadership, or is there a better path to grow the skills that will grow their careers?
Yeah. So spicy take, I don't think higher education is that great of it. I have 3 degrees. One of them is Master of Higher Education. That was a topic I studied, higher education. So it's pretty meta, but you basically get taught how inequitable and terrible higher education is in that program. So the whole thing is very bizarre. I don't think that higher education is the right choice for 95% of people. I think that there are programs that are much more practical and workplace oriented that are going to be more applicable. Doctorate is very theoretical, and you come up with your own research and you're doing your own research, and it may have nothing to do with like 95% of what you do in your job. Not a plug for PLA, but a plug for PLA. Like, there are programs that basically act as if like they're micro master's degrees in a topic that you can get done for less money, less time, and have a cohort of people after it. That's right. I was not paid for this podcast. And they are like basically very accessible ways to do it. I think community for me, programs for me that were more practical were more effective than formalized certifications. Like, I did SHRM. I don't use it. I got a doctorate. I guess I use it sort of, but not in the ways you think, and certainly not 4 years and all the money's worth of it. So no, I don't think people should get a higher education necessarily, unless they just want to learn and that's the structure that works for them.
Love the spicy take.
Yeah, thanks.
Love it.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that's interesting about your education, you didn't touch on what you studied in your bachelor's.
Yeah.
Which was more related to literature and writing.
Yeah.
And I would love your spicy take on, as somebody who has studied writing and adult learning and organizational dynamics, in this age of AI, where we can leverage these tools for an incredible amount of help with writing and content creation and learning, how should HR professionals be approaching using these tools? Like, is it okay for it to write like entire documents or HR policies, or, like, in what ways should we be leveraging it, and where does it get dangerous?
I'm actually curious both of your takes on the same question. I don't think using AI is cheating. I love AI. I think people should use it. I think it is like a calculator is to doing math on paper, right? Like, why wouldn't you do it a little bit faster? But that said, you have to know what good looks like because it hallucinates often. It creates generic, obvious tells often. And so if you were just to deploy it as it is, it has some very dangerous consequences. And so I think it's a mix of both. I think it's using the technology available to you, but having discretion. I think discretion is the most important skill a people leader can have in many ways. Like there are multiple definitions of discretion, like knowing when to share and not to share, and also knowing what good looks like. Like those are both things that need to exist simultaneously. I think they're the most important skill a person can have at this point in the AI world, because for me, I use AI all the time in my writing, but I use it as either an editor or I use it as a structural thinker with me. I don't use it as final product ever. So maybe I can walk through my process, but I'm curious your thoughts before I share my process with AI.
I think I have a similar take on it being an incredibly powerful tool. And I think of it like, in writing these days, it's almost silly if you're not using spell check or grammar check. They exist. It's there. It helps you be a better writer. And I've been using those for ages. There was a tool called the Hemingway app I used to use very often that like you could put in what you wrote and it would tell you at like what grade level equivalent you're writing, like second grade or high school or like way beyond. It's like so hard to read. And too many times I'd have like these red sentences being highlighted of how complicated my sentences were. And it was like a really good partner as a tool to say like, hey, here's how it can be better and easier to understand. And so I think with AI, the way that I love to use it is as a sparring partner. Like it's a place to initially brainstorm. It's a place to hone in and iterate, to help better structure, to dive in further, make sure I'm actually capturing the voice. But the best analogy that I've like sort of embraced is AI right now. And, asking again in 3-6 months, because everything's changing so fast, is I think of it as like a super amazing intern where like I need to give it enough context. I need to give it enough like structure and input. And then it does incredible stuff. I need to check in on it and help to guide it. And I also need to do a final check. And so I think that is a very similar take that you have of is such a powerful tool, platform. I don't even know what to describe because it feels like it's getting more and more powerful by the day. And we'll probably have some better word for it in a few more months. But I think it is something that I feel like I'm just scratching the surface on what we can do with it and the power of it and the potential for it.
Totally. I agree. Yeah. I mean, I use it almost every day in writing because I've gotten feedback my whole career. And you can probably tell by listening to me that like I have too many thoughts and sometimes I'm too long-winded and I love context. I want everyone to have all the context. So like sometimes my emails read like short novellas and that's not okay. And so in higher ed, back in that context, everyone wrote like that. So I learned to write in this like long-winded, like everyone's resume was a curriculum vitae and it was 5 pages. Like joining tech and getting my boss to write me like a 5-word note. I'm like, what did he mean? Like, how am I supposed to understand what this even means? Like, you don't even say which question you were responding to of my 5 questions. And so I think for me, what it's been really helpful for is allowing me to get all my thoughts out on paper, write my whole list of questions, all the things I want to say. And then I run it through ChatGPT or Claude or Grammarly, which Grammarly is a single file portfolio company. So that's great. And then say, shorten it. Make it 30% shorter. And then I look at what it says and I go, did it miss the gist of what I was trying to evoke? If I just cut and paste that, I might actually say the wrong thing. Sometimes it twists my words. It doesn't really fully understand your context, but it helps me get more clear and structured in my thinking. Sometimes my emails are long because I wasn't structured in my thinking. I tend to be like a middle out thinker. Like, here's the thing that's on my mind, but let me give you the big picture. Let me give you the details. That's the wrong order. So like it allows me to put in all my thoughts in the order I have them, like make this better. And then it does. And then I cut and paste it back over once I've sparred with it enough to where it's better. And even then I look at it and I go, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't put this M dash there. Like everything's an M dash in ChatGPT. It drives me absolutely nuts. If Claude doesn't do M dashes, it does like a little tiny dash between 2 spaces, but you can always tell what platform people are using based on their writing. And I try to like un-AI it and make it sound like me again once it got the tone of what I want and like the emphasis of what I want. And that's really helpful. And honestly, I do use it when I post a lot on LinkedIn. And the way I'll use it is sometimes I have 18,000 thoughts in my head and I don't know which one actually makes for a post. So I'll like talk into it. You can actually voice record, and I'll be like, these are all the things I feel like posting about because I have too many thoughts for this world. And I would be posting like 17 times a day, and I'll just talk through all of it, and it will strategize with me. Ooh, a post on this could be interesting, or a post on that. I don't have it write the post. I have it like talk me through it. And then once I have it, then I'll go back, write the post, say, make it more concise, because every time it's too long. And then we'll do the same thing as an email. But I do find it's like you hired like this liberal arts school writing intern who's a beautiful writer, but doesn't really understand what you do and is trying to understand and picks up quickly, but like isn't there yet. And sometimes I feel like, no, you got it wrong, Claude, not again. And it's always so apologetic. And so I feel bad that I was like harsh with it, but I know it doesn't have feelings. And these are just things that we're reconciling in the age of AI. So
with that, I think we have just enough time to do our accelerator round, which are a few questions where we ask, this is a challenge without AI's help in one word to one sentence, Heather. So one question is, where do you love learning from? And I know there's probably many, but is there a source that you find yourself recommending lately to people, whether a book, a podcast, or something else?
So my number one personal source is People Tech Partners, where I met you both, community. If you can't be a part of that, there's also a bunch of other people communities, from the PLA community to Noetic to Startup Experts. So I'll leave it at that.
Andrew and I are part of, I think, all of those. So wonderful. Next question is, in one sentence, what's the best piece of advice you have on how someone can accelerate a successful HR career in today's environment?
Okay, I referred to this, but think like a product manager of the employee experience, not like an HR person. You are a business leader first, and you are overseeing a product, which is the employee experience. That will change everything. The way you talk, the way you do everything.
Amazing. So more product management mindset and more business mindset. And last but not least, we touched on Waypoint Works, but how can our listeners connect with you if they want to follow up afterwards?
I'd love that. I'd love to follow up with anyone. LinkedIn is probably the best. I don't do X or Twitter or anything. I quit that after a long time, and there's a whole story on that one too. But LinkedIn, I'm just /Doshay after the linkedin.com/IN/Doshay. So
love it. Heather, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing your real stories. And we followed a couple of threads along the way. Really appreciate digging deeper into the CEO relationship.
And awesome. Thank you so much.